Next up is get player input. So each player will be placing their mark using a row and column number. So they're going to be asked a question, either like what row, 0, 1, or 2, and what column, 0, 1, or 2. Okay, so that's what this says. We're going to write a function to retrieve it. So one thing we need to remember is that the input always returns a string. So we have to convert it to an integer. But more importantly is that we need the input to be 0, 1, or 2. So if the user puts 3, 5, any other string besides 0, 1, or 2, we don't want to accept that. What we're going to do is repeatedly ask the user until they put in a correct input. So this is one way to catch errors from the user. We are going to return the user's choice as an integer. This function has one parameter, RC. That's just the row or column name as a string. So that'll allow us to ask the player correctly, like which row do you want to use or which column do you want to use. So this function asks exactly one question, not both, one. And we're going to call it twice in our play function later on to capture the row and then the column number. So just to show you what this does, we'll say value equals input. We're going to ask the user which row or column. No, we'll say not which, we'll say enter RC. We'll say 0, 1, or 2 like this. And then we'll put a space at the end because we know we want the user's answer to be separated from the string. And then we're going to return this value as an integer. Okay, so this doesn't do everything that this says right now, but this will be a simple test. All right, so let's go ahead and run this over here. So we're going to say get input. And we'll ask the user for the row first, and then we'll just print out the row just to test it. Okay, so we're going to call our function. We're going to get this row and then just print it out so we can see what is going on. And just look at our function one more time. We just get the input. Here RC will be the string row, and then we will return convert it to an integer and return that. Okay, so let's see how this works. So here we are. Let's print out the board. And then we're here at our last part of our code. Enter 0, 1, or 2. Let's enter in 5 to be wrong. And it accepts it because we haven't built that logic yet. And it just prints it out. So that looks good. So that is working. What we need to do now is just check. We need to keep asking this until we get a value of 0, 1, or 2. We need to keep asking this same question over and over again until we get a value of 0, 1, or 2. So one way to do this is with a while loop. It's probably the best way. We're going to say while true, and we're only going to break out of this loop if the value is 0, 1, or 2. So I'm going to create a list and make it a list of strings. So it's going to test whether val is in 0, 1, or 2. These are the only inputs that are correct. If it's in there, we will break out of the loop. So it's going to repeatedly ask this question and then break out if it is correct. So we could put a message over here, and we could say if it's not, we can just print out a message. We don't have to do this just to give the user more just more information. Value must be 0, 1, or 2. Okay. So now, I mean, this could run infinitely if the user keeps asking or entering the wrong input, but this should work. So it'll only break once the user input is 0, 1, or 2. If it's correct, it'll break out of this loop, which means it goes down here to the return statement, which will then convert this 0, 1, or 2 to an integer and return it. All right, so let's go down here. We'll keep this the same, and we'll run this. So there's our board, 0, 1, or 2. This time we'll do 1. That's correct. So it exits the program. I'm going to run this again. Let's say 5. It says value must be 0, 1, or 2. So enter row. So let's do 9. That's also incorrect. let's just put some string that's incorrect. So we have to keep going until we write, it doesn't matter if we write 0, 1, or 2 like that. It's got to be exactly 0, 1, or 2. Let's do 1 like that. All right, great. So that looks good. And let's do one more. Let's get the column. And we'll say column. And let's run our program one more time. So it's going to ask for the row. Let's say row 1, column 2, and that looks good. So it's just printing out the row and column. We could print them out like that to check. So just one last time, 2, 1, and there's 2, 1. So we'll be placing the next stages. We'll be placing the X, at 2 and 1 right there. Okay, so that does it for getting the player input, and we're getting the row and column one at a time.